Waiting. Going live in 1 second. Ta-da. Perfect. All right, everyone. Welcome back. And this is now episode 2. We are in CoachCon, Executive Coaching, our third season of CoachCon. And we are here to give you the content, the knowledge, and the expertise that you need to either launch, grow, or scale your coaching practice. This season, we are really, really excited to bring in some experts who just are doing fantastic things in the coaching space. And this episode, we are talking to Oliver Marcelle. Oliver Marcelle is an author, speaker, coach, and marriage strategist who explains who explains individuals, couples, and teams how to build stronger, more effective relationships. As a co-founder of Denoli LLC, he focuses on communication, conflict resolution, and leadership to help people show up as their best selves at home, work, and in life. Drawing from personal experience and his book Overcoming the Man Laws, Oliver delivers practical strategies that move people from surviving to thriving. He is especially passionate about empowering men, strengthening marriages, and creating meaningful change within teams and communities. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Oliver Marcelle. Oliver?
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Ty. Thank you to you and the team for this opportunity and for the introduction. I'm excited to be here. I learned from Charles and Cynthia in the session before this, and looking forward to learning from others that will be in this as well. I am, like Ty said, just passionate about seeing individuals thrive. And just through the course of this coaching journey and kind of living this thing out in my own personal life, have kind of come up with some things that have not only worked for me, but uh, you know, I've been blessed. I won't say it's on me. I think it's a blessing, the gift that was given to me. So I don't take credit for it. But there's some things that I've experienced that I believe have been helpful, and through the coaching experience, others have said that have been helpful as well. And Ty mentioned the book Overcoming the Man Laws, and what I'm going to talk about today actually comes out of that. So there's something that I learned in leadership that was transferable, not just in leadership in the corporate space, but leadership in my home, in my marriage, with my children and in church and other places. And it's this maintenance man mindset, right? And so we're going to jump into what that looks like. It comes straight out of the book. I'll go ahead and share my screen so that you can have some visuals. I think I'm a pretty good person to look at, but I'm gonna give you something else to look at. How about that? I'll give you some slides to look at as well. But we're going to look at the maintenance man mindset, and essentially just redefining leadership beyond the spotlight. And it comes out of this book. I heard somebody say this, and please forgive me. I'm not arrogant by any means. I heard somebody say that to quote yourself is arrogant. So I apologize in advance because I'm about to quote myself, but I'm not arrogant by any means. But it comes from a quote from my book that says leadership is sometimes looks more like maintenance man than CEO. And we're going to talk about what that looks like, just sharing some things that I've learned as it relates to that. So sometimes the most valuable leadership is actually the unseen work. And it's the unseen work that keeps everything from breaking down. I was telling somebody not too long ago, I said, man, I don't think I've ever seen a CEO clean the bathrooms in his or her building. However, there are some maintenance components to leadership that will actually cause things to run a whole lot smoother than if you didn't have this mindset. And so we're just going to share a simple way to see leadership differently. So just want to expand your perspective and give you a few practical things that you can do that actually help to play this out, to strengthen some trust, to gain some clarity and some follow through with your team. So let's jump in. Let's talk about why that matters. That matters because it most teams don't break. This is what I've learned and what I've experienced. Most teams don't really break down because there isn't vision. Usually there is vision, right? But often the systems aren't maintained. And so that's kind of what I've shared here. Sometimes the system just breaks down because of lack of maintenance, right? Or there's some pressure, right? And leaderships have to hold up under pressure. And so sometimes the pressure just gets to you because the pressure reveals what's real. The pressure reveals how strong the trust is. The pressure reveals how clear the expectations are, or unclear in some cases. And it also reveals how consistent the follow through is, or whether there is consistency at all. And so that's why this is important. If maintenance is neglected, you can probably guarantee that there's going to be some misalignment. There's going to be some need for some rework. There's going to be some disengagement, and there's probably going to be some burnout. So we're going to talk about today something that's not just theory. It's something that's lived experience for me. It's a mindset shift that I've helped individuals to go through. And we're going to talk about the model that's used to diagnose what the team needs and give you some practical maintenance things that you can look at. All right. So I think we're all on the same page. Hopefully. Can I see the chat? Give me 1 second. Let me get my screens together. I want to be able to see the chat. All right. So if you're with me so far, just put a 1 in the chat. If you're with me, put a 1 in the chat. I'm going to ask you to do some stuff that's going to make you kind of pay attention a little bit. All right. We got some 1s in the chat. Perfect. Perfect. So here's what we're going to talk through very briefly today. I'm a framework kind of guy. And so, the people who work with me are always like, man, this guy has a framework for everything. I probably do. And so this is the one for this. It's the reframe, followed by the roadmap, and then there'll be some resources and some reps, because I'm a practical guy. Anybody who has ever spent time with me, anybody who has ever been a coaching client knows that one thing I try to shy away from is leaving you with just what I call conceptual knowledge. We get conceptual knowledge all the time. The question becomes, what can I do with that? So if you're talking to me, Oliver, if you're talking to me about the maintenance mindset, I'm hoping you're gonna give me something that I can actually use, and that's the reps. And so we'll talk through what that is, because what we want to do essentially is build something that is going to be sustainable over time. All right. So let's jump right in. Let's see how my screens work here. All right, they're working. All right. So the reframe. We'll start with the reframe. The reframe is essentially just what you think it is. It's actually reframing some of our thoughts, reframing some of our ideas, and reframing some of our behaviors, right? Because many times we're taught in leadership, let me speak for myself. Growing up, I was taught in leadership that the leader is the person who's the most visible. I was taught that it's the person who's out front the most. It's the person who's the loudest. It's the person who's making all the big judgment calls. That's what I grew up believing, right? And that was from a lot of different entities. That was from school, that was from church, that was from jobs that I've had, just kind of getting this idea that, okay, the person who has the most visibility is the person who is the biggest leader. But visibility is not always the same as leadership. And that's something that I've learned. Sometimes it's not just about being visible. Often it's about who sustains performance and the work that it takes to sustain performance. And so there's a question I want you to think about. The question is, what's the unseen work that's holding your team together? Whether you have a team, and let me talk to the people who don't have a team. Let me say this before I keep going. There's times that I will talk about this and people are like, well, I'm not a leader. You are. Let's just make that clear first. You may not have a team under you. You may not be the CEO of something, but you are a leader. You're a leader in your family. You're a leader in your community. If you're a churchgoer, you're a leader in your church. You're a leader. You are a leader. There is someone who is looking at you, believe it or not, right? And so I don't want you to dismiss this if you don't actually have a team or you're not in the corporate space, because you are a leader, and the combination of CEO and maintenance man is still going to be important in how you lead in your life, right? So often the biggest thing is not a new strategy. The biggest thing is repairing trust, clarifying expectations, and tightening up the follow through. And so as we reframe our thinking around visibility and how much work goes into this leadership concept, I want you to think that. I want you to think about that. All right. Think about the fact that you are a leader, and as a leader, you should be looking to fuse, if you will, all of the components of leadership, not just the out front stuff, not just the spotlight stuff, but the stuff that's behind the scenes, the systems that are going to make things work and hold things together. All right. Don't jump ahead of me, computer. All right. So let's talk about the roadmap. And the roadmap is basically how I see leadership from a balanced perspective. This is just my thoughts visualized, right? So if you look at the roadmap on the slide, you have power, and you have everything that falls underneath power, right? So you have vision, you have decisions that are being made, you have the standards that are being set, the operating procedures that are in place, you have the accountability that's being set as well. But then there's a maintenance side of this. And I believe that the maintenance side, coupled with the power side, is where we get this holistic leadership balance. And so on the maintenance side, you're going to hear these words several times: trust, clarity, follow through, and repair. Those things help to balance out the power. And I'm going to talk in just a second about what happens when we lean too much towards power or we lean too much towards maintenance. And that's the reason why I use the word balance, because sometimes, and I've made the mistake of doing this, sometimes I lean way too far to the maintenance side, and that causes just as many problems as leaning too far to the power side, right? So you can't sustainably lead with only power, and you can't sustainably lead with only maintenance, right? So if you overinvest in one side, you get some imbalance. And so let's look at what that looks like. If you overinvest, if there's too much power and there's no maintenance, then things might happen quickly. You might get some quick results, but people stop telling you the truth. And that's been my experience. Like, things will move quick, but you won't really know how people really feel about you, about the project, about the system. Maybe they're going along with the flow because maybe there's some level of fear, whether it's fear of losing their job or whatever the case may be. You cut that level of communication that allows you to have a pulse on what's going on, right? So too much power, it can become brittle. Too much maintenance, now things you can kind of maybe get soft. Sometimes the standards are softened, right? Too much maintenance. Oh, this is my guy. He's my buddy. He's going to vouch for me. So I can kind of, you know, I can kind of get lazy a little bit. And so I can drift, I can get comfortable, and accountability kind of goes out the window when there's too much maintenance. And so that's kind of what happens when we over index. Issues don't disappear if there's too much power. They just go underground. And they end up, this is my experience, they end up coming back bigger when they do resurface. So if you think about if you get the visual in your mind of sweeping something under the rug, and the more you sweep something under the rug, the bigger that bulge in the rug gets. And then people just start tripping over it, which is causing now more problems than if we had just dealt with it, right? So both sides can create tension. And if there's too much tension on one side, you can see from the picture here that it breaks. That's when the system breaks, right? So tension builds when we're not getting this level of balance, or if we're over indexing too much, the system ends up breaking, right? So there's some questions that we can ask as it relates to this roadmap that can kind of help us get the level of balance that we're looking for. And some of those questions are: what's slipping? So So what I mean by that is, what are the standards? What are the things that are just kind of quietly eroding? Some of the things that they were there one day, and then all of a sudden over time, man, that's not as important anymore. We don't really hold anybody that accountable anymore to this. Or I think this is in the handbook, but nobody does it. Those kinds of things. What are the standards, the deadlines, the operating procedures that are just quietly eroding? So what's slipping? The second question is, what's silent? What have you stopped hearing? What kind of feedback have you stopped getting? What kind of information have you stopped getting? What are the things that used to be it was vulnerability and transparency, I think it was, that Charles and Cynthia talked about. Where do you see that missing now? Do you see the level of transparency that used to be there that isn't there anymore? Right. So what's silent? The third question is, what's stuck? What's stuck? What's the thing that keeps popping up because it never really got dealt with? What's that bump in the rug, if you will, that people keep tripping over because we just haven't picked up the rug and dealt with what's under there? And the fourth thing is, what is salvageable? What can be repaired? Like, what are the things that if you just tweak it, if you go back to the drawing board, if you have a meeting, if you have a conversation, what are the things that you can potentially repair before you replace them? And I'm going to talk about that in just a second, because yes, replacement might be necessary, but sometimes it's repair that's necessary and not replacement. And so the goal of asking these questions as it relates to getting the balance that we're looking for is to just diagnose before you decide. Because what happens is, when we start to see things slipping, or things become silent, or things become stuck, now we start making decisions based off of that, as opposed to asking the questions, figuring out what needs to be tweaked, what needs to be repaired, right? And so once we ask those questions and we start to identify the things that are happening, the things that need to be repaired, the things that need to be revisited, there's some resources that can be used to help us get this balance between power and maintenance, that right balance. And so here are some of the resources that can be used. One is vulnerability. And again, in the last session, that was talked about. The second thing is having a pit crew, and we'll talk about what that is in just a second. And then the third thing is what I just mentioned: repair versus replace. What needs to be repaired versus what needs to be replaced. And I just want to stress this. This is not just about soft skills, right? This is about system skills. This is about the system that drives whatever it is, the organization, the family, whatever the case may be. This is the system that drives that. And so let's talk about some of the resources. The first one is vulnerability. And vulnerability, when people hear vulnerability, sometimes they think oversharing. And I've been guilty of thinking that, and which is the reason why sometimes I didn't want to be vulnerable, because it's just some stuff I don't really want to share with you. So I'm not going to do that, right? But that's not what it means. Vulnerability, and in the context of leadership, let's keep it in the context of leadership. I call it accurate self-reporting. Or let me put it this way: early and accurate self-reporting, right? Because it's telling the truth before the pressure turns into something. Because often when we don't tell the truth before the pressure builds, once the pressure builds, that turns into poor decisions. And as a leader, we can't afford to make poor decisions, right? And so vulnerability is something that we really want to make sure that we are incorporating as it relates to getting this balance between power and maintenance, right? And so there's some sentences on the screen there. Here's what I know, or what I don't know, right? Some easy practical ways to kind of start the vulnerability piece. Here's what I need from you, or what do you need from me? And what am I not seeing? Those are some starter questions that can open the door for the level of vulnerability that can produce early, accurate self-reporting, right? So we're going to talk about reps later, but I want to just throw one in here real quick. One quick rep that you can do, rep being the practical thing, is pick one of these that you'll use this week and decide how you'll use it, right? So whether it's uh, what do you need from me, or here's what I need from you, pick one of those and try that this week as it relates to opening up a space of vulnerability that allows for you to get that balance between power and maintenance. So that's vulnerability. Another resource that was mentioned is a pit crew. You got to have a pit crew. Now, a word that's used very common is community. So if you think community, right? A lot of leaders try to carry everything alone. Can I tell you? Listen, misery loves company. So if you have ever been guilty of trying to carry everything on your own, just put a 2 in the chat, because I'm gonna tell you right now, that's a struggle I still have to this day. Is I just want to do it all. I want to fix it. I'm just gonna bust through the walls. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna be the one who does it. I saw Kathy put a 2 in the chat. I'm guilty of that. And a lot of leaders try to carry everything on their own. However, here's the danger in that. The danger in that is that self-sufficiency, while it is a phenomenal trait, can often quietly become isolation. And isolation produces terrible decisions. I'm a witness. I'm not even going to ask anybody. Misery loves company, but I'll go out on this limb by myself. Isolation can produce very bad decisions. And so we want to have some people around us, a pit crew around us. A pit crew could be a peer, it could be a mentor, a coach, just a truth teller, somebody who's not going to be one of the folks in the comments was talking about yes men, somebody who's not going to be a yes man, right? We need a pit crew around us. Somebody that's going to help you stay grounded, somebody that's going to just help you stay clear and help you stay consistent under pressure. And one thing I tell people all the time, people that I work with all the time, contracting help, while it has often been labeled as a weakness, contracting help is actually a leadership strength, because it shows that you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, and you know how to put things together in order to get what you need to get. So don't ever feel like contracting help is a sign that your leadership is waning. It is actually the opposite, right? And so some things that you want to think about when it comes to a pit crew is, who do you call before you make a decision? Who do you call when you're frustrated? Who do you turn to when you're burning out? Who do you turn to when you're depleted? And are those people giving you sound advice? Are they steering you in the right direction? Do you have an executive coach who can be a part of your pit crew? You need somebody who can be a part of your pit crew. That is a resource that you definitely want to have. And then, man, this computer just wants to get ahead of me, doesn't it? And then the third resource is determining whether we need to repair something or replace something. And that is, I'm gonna give a funny example. It's funny to me. I don't know, but it doesn't have anything to do with leadership per se. But I had an issue with our kitchen sink, and it turned out to be a small issue. So I'll give you the end of the story, and then I'll go back. And initially, before all looking at the piping that was there and figuring out that it was just an issue with one of the fasteners that could be fixed, I was like, man, just call somebody and just tear the whole thing out. Now, while that would have fixed the problem, replacing everything, it would have cost significantly more than actually just taking some time, looking around, doing some diagnostic work, and realizing, you know what? This fastener right here just needs to be replaced with a different one. And often we do that as well. Sometimes the frustration just builds, the pressure builds. We don't have the pit crew. We're not in a space where we can have these conversations that are vulnerable. So we're not doing the diagnosis before the decision. And as a result, we end up just wiping out something that we could have just tweaked a little bit, right? And so, is it a skill issue? Coach it. Is it a clarity issue? Let's define it. Is it a system issue? Let's make the necessary adjustments, right? So sometimes it's not about replacing things. Now, I'm not saying replacement is not necessary. There are times where replacement is necessary. I'll go back to the same kitchen sink issue. I could not, no matter what I tried to tweak, our garbage disposal was just not going to work. So what do you do then? You absolutely replace it, right? And so, but taking the time, now we're talking about the balance between power and maintenance, taking the time to go through this process of diagnosis before decision is going to be the thing that allows you to determine whether you need to fix or whether you need to replace. All right. So, what does this look like actually putting it to work? What does it look like actually putting it to work? And please, if you got any comments or questions, because of the way the screens are set up, I can't see everybody. So please put them in the chat because I do have the chat up as we go along. So here's what it looks like putting this to work. And I've helped a lot of people go through this by just kind of, it seems simple, but it really helps to create a pattern. And once that pattern is established, they start to see results based on the patterns that are established. And it's just pick an issue. Pick an issue. What's an issue, a real issue that you're dealing with right now? And then once you determine and identify what that issue is, then go back through the roadmap questions and ask the questions. What's missing? What's stuck? What's silent? And then as you're going through that, right, what's slipping? What's salvageable? Asking those roadmap questions, right? Then once you determine that, do you have a resource that you can use, that you can apply? Is it vulnerability? Is that the resource that needs to be applied? Is it that you're lacking the right pit crew? You don't have the right people around you? Is it that you haven't taken the time to do a level of diagnosis before decision? Now, and determine what's the resource that we have to put towards this. And then the action item that you execute. What's the action item after you've done all that determination? What's the action item that you are going to take immediately? I know it says 7 days, but for in our world, 7 days could be immediately. But what is the thing that you're going to do? Because here's what my experience is. And I think it was talked about in the last session, right? Holding people accountable. Cynthia and I think it was Charles that was talking about, hey, if the client has something that they need to do before the next 30 days when the session comes and it hasn't been done, then they have to be held accountable. And what I often see is we'll go through this process. We'll pick the issue. We'll run the roadmap questions. We'll pick a resource, but the action item is the thing that falls through the cracks. And so when we come back around to it, either the issue is way bigger at this point because we didn't take an action item, or we have now just been so burnt out that we've swept it under the rug. And that's another problem in itself. So we have to take the action item, right? So if you want some examples of some things that I was taking this kind of from a corporate perspective, because this is the last time I did this was a corporate team. But if there's a performance slip, if there is a collaboration breakdown, if there's a meeting drag, or if we want to take it to your family, if there's a miscommunication, if there is conflict that isn't being resolved, if there isn't team synergy, or if there isn't family synergy, like what are some of those things that you can pick out as issues that you can run this system with, that you can ask the roadmap questions, and that you can get to a resolution. All right. So we're coming down to the end. Here's some practical stuff. Here's some reps that you can take. Right. And there's many, but I just picked a couple. Clarity. Right. How much do we want to raise the clarity? Candor, consistency. How much do we want to raise these things? Right. With clarity, do people know what great looks like? Do they understand what the team is supposed to accomplish? Are they aware of and have they bought into the goals and visions? Like, is there clarity? Do they even understand why they're there? Right? Candor. Do people feel safe telling you the truth? Like, has the environment been created and sustained and maintained so that people tell you the truth and you're okay with hearing the truth? And consistency is follow through normal. And we've all been in spaces where consistency is not the norm, unfortunately, right? And so, what's one of those things that you want to raise at least by 1 point in the next 30 days? And that's something that I want you guys to think about, right? So you can raise clarity. You can pick one per week, raise clarity, raise candor, raise consistency, run a fix before replace. You can choose one thing and track that weekly. Because here's the thing, the goal is not just to amass a ton of information. The goal is actually to put this thing into work so that you see progress, so that you see the potential being recognized and realized in the people that you are leading. Okay. So what is one thing that you're actually going to work through in the next 30 days and stick to doing that? Okay. So those are the reps. And then in closing, I'll just recap. We want to be able to now have this balance between the power side of leadership and the maintenance side of leadership. We don't want to overextend in one area or the other because that will cause problems. We want to be able to look at our program, and we want to be able to determine what are the things that are slipping, what are the things that are silent, what are the things that are salvageable. We need to then incorporate a pit crew and use the resources to get clarity, to get candor, to get consistency, to make a determination and a diagnosis before we make a decision as to whether we need to replace or refix, right? And the reason why is because leadership is not only what you decide, it's what you maintain. So sometimes leadership is the big call. And sometimes leadership is the follow through, the repair, the clarity, and the conversations that we have that keep the systems healthy. So my question to you as I end this is, what does your team, or what do you need to begin to maintain starting this week? I want you to be able to lead like a maintenance man and inspire like a CEO. So what do you need to do this week that will allow